The morning had started ordinarily enough for Sebastian Clark Covington. He'd woken up in the obscenely comfortable king-size bed in the east wing of the Covington estate, the one with sheets that cost more than most people's rent and pillows that seemed to have been stuffed with clouds and good intentions. He'd showered in the marble bathroom that was bigger than his childhood home, used products with French names he couldn't pronounce, and made his way down to breakfast in the conservatory, with a morning light filtered through windows so clean they might as well have been invisible. What he hadn't expected was for his alpha's mother, the formidable Margaret Covington, to be waiting for him with a look that could freeze lava and probably had at least once. "Sebastian," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness that immediately put him on high alert. "We need to talk." Those 4 words were never good. Sebastian had learned that much in the 2 years he'd been with Dominic Covington, heir to the Covington fortune and, unfortunately, son to the most controlling alpha woman Sebastian had ever met. And he'd met some doozies. His own mother was a piece of work, but Margaret Covington made her look like a Hallmark card. "Good morning, Margaret," Sebastian replied carefully, taking a seat at the breakfast table. He reached for the coffee pot because no amount of family drama was going to keep him from caffeine. "Thank you very much," but Margaret's next words made him freeze mid-pour. "I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." Sebastian's mind raced. Which elephant? There were so many potential elephants when it came to Margaret Covington. Was it the fact that she'd accidentally excluded him from the last 3 family photos? The way she constantly introduced him as Dominic's companion with a pause that could sink ships? Or perhaps the 17 subtle and not-so-subtle hints she'd been dropping about omega fertility treatments? "I'm not sure what you mean," Sebastian said, though he had a sinking feeling he knew exactly where this was going. His Eggs Benedict suddenly looked less appetizing and more like a final meal. Margaret set down her teacup with a delicate clink that somehow sounded ominous. "You and Dominic have been together for 2 years now." 2 years, and still no pregnancy. There it was. "Margaret, these things take time." The Harrisons' Omega son was pregnant within 6 months. The Ashfords' Omega had twins in the first year. Margaret's eyes were cold as she studied Sebastian over the rim of her teacup. Even the Blackwoods, and their bloodline is notoriously difficult, managed an heir within 18 months. She paused, letting the words settle like poison. "It makes one wonder if perhaps there's a problem." Sebastian felt heat rising to his cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger that burned in equal measure. "Are you seriously suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything, dear. I'm stating facts." Margaret's smile never reached her eyes. "Dominic needs an heir. The Covington line must continue. And if you're unable to provide that..." She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air like a guillotine blade. Sebastian had seen that blade coming for months now, and every pointed comment, every helpful article about fertility left on his pillow, every time Margaret reminded him that Omegas had biological duties to fulfill. But hearing it spoken aloud in that condescending tone was something else entirely. "I'm not a broodmare," Sebastian said, his voice tight. "And Dominic and I are happy." "He doesn't care about." "Dominic doesn't know what he cares about," Margaret interrupted smoothly. "He's blinded by sentiment." "But I'm thinking of the family's future." She set down her teacup and folded her hands on the table, the gesture so deliberate, so rehearsed, that Sebastian realized she'd been planning this conversation for weeks. "And I'm afraid, dear, that future doesn't include an Omega who can't fulfill his most basic function." The words hit Sebastian like a slap. Not a physical one, Margaret was too refined for that, but something worse. Something designed to cut right to the core of everything he'd ever worried about, every insecurity he'd ever tried to hide. He stood up so quickly, his chair scraped against the marble floor with a screech that made the household staff flinch in the doorway. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious." Margaret didn't even flinch. "I've already had your things packed. Gerald will escort you out." "You're kicking me out?" Sebastian's voice cracked slightly, and he hated himself for it. "Dominic is in Singapore. He doesn't even know about this." Dominic will understand once I explain the situation. Margaret picked up her teacup again, as if dismissing him entirely. Now, please, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be, as if summoned by some invisible bell. Because of course Margaret had planned every detail, down to the timing. Gerald the butler appeared in the doorway, looking deeply uncomfortable. Behind him, Sebastian could see two members of the household staff holding his suitcases. His packed suitcases. They packed while he was sleeping. "Madam has requested that I escort you to the gate," Gerald said quietly, his tone apologetic. "I'm terribly sorry, Master Sebastian." Sebastian looked between Margaret's cold expression and Gerald's sympathetic one, and realized with a sinking feeling that this was actually happening. She was actually throwing him out. 2 years of his life, packed into 3 suitcases and a designer handbag, being carried out by staff who couldn't quite meet his eyes. Pride warred with panic in Sebastian's chest. Part of him wanted to argue, to fight, to call Dominic immediately and tell him what his mother was doing. But another part, the part that had been dealing with Margaret's subtle put-downs and not-so-subtle disapproval for 2 years, just wanted to get out with whatever dignity he had left. "Fine," Sebastian said, lifting his chin even though his hands were shaking. "But this isn't over. Dominic will do what's best for the family," Margaret said, examining her teacup like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "He always has." The walk down the grand staircase, through the marble foyer, and down the pristine driveway of the Covington estate was the longest of Sebastian's life. Each step felt like a small death, another goodbye to the life he'd built, the future he'd imagined, the family he thought he was becoming part of. Gerald carried one of the suitcases, maintaining a respectful silence until they reached the gates. "For what it's worth, Master Sebastian," Gerald said quietly, "I don't agree with Madam's methods. Master Dominic cares for you very much." "Not enough to stand up to his mother," Sebastian muttered, then immediately felt bad. It wasn't Gerald's fault. The man had been nothing but kind to him for 2 years, bringing him tea when he was stressed, pretending not to notice when Sebastian cried after Margaret's particularly cutting remarks. "Sorry. Thank you for being kind, Gerald. Best of luck to you, sir. I hope things work out." With that, the gates of the Covington estate closed behind Sebastian with a definitive clang, and he was left standing on the sidewalk with 3 suitcases, a designer handbag he absolutely wasn't giving back, the Birkin bag Dominic had bought him, thank you very much, and the remnants of his dignity. For a long moment, Sebastian just stood there, trying to process what had just happened. He'd woken up that morning as Sebastian Clark Covington, partner to one of the most eligible alphas in the city, living in luxury at the Covington estate. He'd had a breakfast date with Eggs Benedict and a future that seemed secure, if imperfect. Now he was just Sebastian, standing on a sidewalk, homeless. The absurdity of it all hit him like a truck, and he felt a laugh bubble up in his throat. It came out slightly hysterical, causing a passing jogger to give him a worried look and cross to the other side of the street. Sebastian pulled out his phone and dialed the one person who would understand. The one person who'd been telling him for months that Margaret Covington was a monster and he deserved better. Julian's phone of friendship and emotional support. "How may I direct your call?" his best friend answered cheerfully. "Julian, you won't believe what just happened." There was a pause, that particular pause that meant Julian had picked up on Sebastian's tone and was already shifting into crisis mode. "Oh God, what did she do?" Julian's voice dropped from cheerful to concerned in half a second. "Did you finally snap and tell Dominic's mom that her lip filler migrated to her earlobes?" "Because I've been saying that for months, and honestly, someone had to." Despite everything, Sebastian felt a genuine laugh escape. "What? No. Though now that you mention it, you're not wrong about the filler situation." He took a shaky breath. "But no, Julian. She kicked me out." "She what?" Julian's voice went up about 3 octaves. "Like, metaphorically kicked you out of a conversation, or literally kicked me out of the estate. I'm standing on the sidewalk right now with my suitcases." Sebastian looked down at his ridiculous, expensive suitcases, Designer luggage that had cost more than most people's cars, sitting on the curb like refugees. Like some kind of Victorian orphan. A well-dressed Victorian orphan, but still. I'm coming to get you right now. Don't move. There was shuffling on Julian's end of the line, the sound of keys being grabbed. Actually, move to somewhere with a bench. You shouldn't be standing in your condition. My condition. I'm not elderly, Julian. You're emotionally devastated. That's a condition. Find a bench. Text me your location. I'll be there in 20. 20 minutes later, 20 minutes of Sebastian sitting on a bench, watching the world go by, wondering how his life had imploded so spectacularly before noon. Julian pulled up in his slightly beat-up sedan, took one look at Sebastian's face, and immediately got out to pull him into a hug that smelled like lavender laundry detergent in solidarity. She's a monster, Julian declared into Sebastian's hair. An actual monster. We're going to put itching powder in her face cream. I know a guy who knows a guy. We're not doing that, Sebastian said, but he appreciated the sentiment. He appreciated it so much. Fine, but we're definitely doing something. Julian pulled back, his dark eyes scanning Sebastian's face with the concern of someone who'd seen him through every crisis for the past 10 years. Get in. We're going to my place. You're going to tell me everything, and then we're going to plot revenge. Appropriate. Legal revenge. Mostly legal. As Julian loaded the suitcases into his trunk, making appropriately horrified noises about how much luggage one person could possibly own, Sebastian caught sight of his reflection in a car window. He looked tired. His eyes were red from the tears he'd been holding back, the ones that kept threatening to spill over despite his best efforts. His hair was a mess from running his hands through it nervously, and there was a crease on his cheek from where he'd fallen asleep on the pillow the night before, dreaming of a future that no longer existed. But under the exhaustion and hurt, there was something else. A spark. Margaret Covington had thrown him out, declared him defective, assumed he wasn't good enough for her precious son. Fine. He'd show her exactly what a defective Omega could do, just as soon as he figured out what that was. Julian's apartment was a cozy one-bedroom in a converted warehouse building downtown. It was roughly the size of one of the Covington estate's walk-in closets, the small one, the one for off-season coats, but it had something the estate had never had: warmth. The walls were covered in posters from various concerts and art shows, layered on top of each other like a timeline of Julian's interests over the years. Shelves overflowed with books in no particular order. Sci-fi next to poetry, next to cookbooks, next to graphic novels. There were plants everywhere. Julian had what he called a minor obsession with keeping green things alive, which Sebastian found endearing, if slightly chaotic. Okay, Julian said, positioning Sebastian on a well-worn sofa and wrapping him in what appeared to be a hand-knitted blanket that smelled faintly of cat. Though Julian didn't have a cat, which raised questions Sebastian didn't have the energy to ask. First things first. Are you okay? And I mean really okay. Not the I'm fine thing you do where you're clearly not fine and I have to drag it out of you over 3 glasses of wine. Sebastian pulled the blanket tighter around himself. Now that the adrenaline was wearing off, he felt exhausted and hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside him and left only the shell. I don't know, he admitted. It still doesn't feel real. Did Margaret Covington really just kick me out for not getting pregnant fast enough? That's literally what happened, yes. Julian disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, complete with mini marshmallows because he was a saint. Which is insane, by the way. You're not a vending machine that's supposed to dispense Covington airs on command. Try telling her that. I would love to. I have several choice words for Margaret Covington, and most of them are 4 letters long. Julian sat down next to Sebastian, tucking his feet under him on the couch. What did Dominic say? Does he even know? He's in Singapore. His flight doesn't land for another 2 days. Sebastian took a sip of hot chocolate and felt a wave of nausea roll over him, probably from stress, probably from the emotional whiplash of the morning. He set the mug down quickly. By the time he gets back, his mother will have already spun this into some story about how I decided to leave. How I needed space to think about my future. You have to call him. And say what? Hey, honey, your mom kicked me out because I'm apparently a defective Omega who can't perform his most basic biological function? Sebastian's voice cracked slightly on the last words, and he hated how small he sounded. How broken. Julian moved to sit closer, putting an arm around Sebastian's shoulders. You are not defective. You know that, right? Margaret Covington is a controlling nightmare who thinks she can play puppet master with everyone's lives. This isn't about you being defective. It's about her being a terrible person. Then why do I feel so? Sebastian trailed off, not sure how to articulate the mix of shame, anger, and hurt swirling in his chest like a hurricane. Because she hit you where it hurts. She knows Omega biology and pregnancy are sensitive topics, and she weaponized that against you. Julian's voice was firm, certain in a way Sebastian wished he could be. It's manipulative and cruel, and Dominic is going to lose his mind when he finds out. Will he, though? Sebastian asked quietly. He's never stood up to her before. About anything. She picks out his suits. She schedules his appointments. She probably still cuts his food for him. Okay, that last one is probably an exaggeration. Is it, though? Have you seen them at dinner parties? They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them, both like a heavy blanket. What are you going to do? Julian asked finally. I don't know. Sebastian laughed bitterly. Find a job, I guess. Find a place to live. Figure out my life. You know, all the things I thought I wouldn't have to worry about because I was stupidly in love with an alpha who came with his own trust fund and estate. You can stay here as long as you need to. We'll figure this out together. Julian, you live in a one-bedroom apartment. I can. You can, and you will. Julian's tone brooked no argument. The couch is surprisingly comfortable. I've tested it after many questionable life choices, and I've been meaning to have a roommate anyway. Gets lonely sometimes talking to my plants. Despite everything, Sebastian smiled. You're the best friend anyone could ask for. I know. It's both a blessing and a curse. Julian grabbed the remote. Now we're going to watch terrible reality TV, eat our feelings, and forget about the Covington family for at least 3 hours. And then we're going to make a plan. Sounds perfect. That night, Sebastian lay on Julian's couch, which was, to his surprise, actually quite comfortable, staring at the ceiling and thinking. His phone sat on the coffee table, silent. No calls from Dominic. He was probably in back-to-back meetings in Singapore, completely unaware that his mother had dismantled their life while he was gone. No messages from anyone at the estate except a brief, formal text from Gerald, confirming that the rest of Sebastian's belongings would be shipped to whatever address he provided. It was surreal. 2 years of his life, gone in a single morning. He found himself thinking about the early days with Dominic. They'd met at a charity auction, cliché Sebastian knew, but it had been genuine. Dominic had been charming and attentive, and unlike other alphas Sebastian had dated, he'd actually listened when Sebastian talked about his interests, his dreams, his plans for the future. The future. Sebastian had been so sure about that future. He'd imagined growing old with Dominic, raising children together, building a life that was theirs despite Margaret's constant interference. He'd imagined holidays and birthdays and lazy Sunday mornings. Now he had nothing but 3 suitcases and a Birkin bag. When had it changed? When had Dominic stopped seeing him as a partner and started seeing him as, what? A future parent for the Covington heir? Had he always seen him that way? Had Sebastian been blind to it because he wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale? His stomach churned, and he felt another wave of nausea. Stress, he told himself. It was just stress. But something nagged at the back of his mind. Something he couldn't quite put his finger on. When was his last heat? Sebastian usually kept track religiously. On his phone, in a journal, everywhere. But with everything going on, Margaret's increasing pressure about pregnancy, the fertility treatment suggestions, the constant subtle implications that he was failing in his Omega duties, he'd been distracted. He grabbed his phone and opened his calendar app, scrolling back through the weeks. 6 weeks. It had been 6 weeks since his last heat. Sebastian sat up so fast he nearly fell off the couch. No, that couldn't be right. He was just late. Stress could do that. Margaret Covington's nightmare behavior could definitely cause enough stress to throw off his cycle. His body was probably just reacting to the emotional turmoil, the upheaval, But even as he told himself that, doubt crept in, because he had been feeling off lately. The fatigue, the nausea, the weird food aversions. He nearly gagged at the smell of coffee that morning, and he loved coffee. He'd been attributing it all to stress, to Margaret, to the pressure of being a Covington. But what if? Oh no, Sebastian whispered to the empty room. Oh no. The next morning, Sebastian found himself standing in the pharmacy aisle at 7 a.m., staring at what appeared to be several hundred different pregnancy test options. Julian stood next to him, still in his pajamas, flannel pants with little pineapples on them, because he was that person. Because Sebastian had woken him up at 6:45 a.m. in a full-blown panic. Why are there so many options? Sebastian hissed, very aware of the elderly woman shopping for antacids 2 aisles over who kept giving them curious looks. Don't they all do the same thing? I mean, I assume so. Julian picked up a box and studied it like it was written in a foreign language. This one says, early detection. That sounds good, right? What about this one that says, digital display? Is that better? Do I need digital? How should I know? I've never bought a pregnancy test. Well, neither have I. The elderly woman looked over at them with open interest now, clearly enjoying the show. Sebastian grabbed the nearest box, he didn't even look at which one, and speed-walked toward the checkout. Smooth, Julian muttered, following with 2 more boxes because what if the first one is defective or something? At the checkout counter, the teenage cashier looked supremely uninterested in their purchase, which Sebastian appreciated more than he could express. He paid in cash because God forbid this showed up on any credit card statement that might somehow make its way to Margaret Covington, and practically ran out of the store. Back at Julian's apartment, the 3 pregnancy test boxes sat on the bathroom counter like tiny bombs waiting to explode. You have to take one eventually, Julian said from where he was hovering in the doorway. I know. I'm just. Sebastian stared at the boxes. What if I am pregnant? Then you're pregnant. What if I'm not? Then you're not. And we figure out why you've been feeling sick. What if? Sebastian. You're spiraling. Take the test. Sebastian picked up one of the boxes and read the instructions 3 times, even though they were fairly straightforward and involved exactly 2 steps. His hands were shaking. Do you want me to leave? Julian asked. No, stay. I need moral support, okay? Okay, but I'm not going to watch you pee. That's where I draw the friendship line. Despite his anxiety, Sebastian laughed. Fair enough. 5 minutes later, he'd taken a test and set it on the counter. According to the box, he needed to wait 3 minutes. 3 minutes had never felt so long. Sebastian and Julian sat on the bathroom floor, backs against the wall, staring at the test like it might suddenly sprout legs and run away. What are you going to do if it's positive? Julian asked quietly. I don't know. Sebastian pulled his knees up to his chest. Call Dominic, I guess. That's a fun conversation. Hey, remember how your mom kicked me out for not being able to get pregnant? Plot twist. The irony is pretty spectacular. The irony is that I'm potentially pregnant and homeless. You're not homeless. You have me. I can't raise a baby in your 1-bedroom apartment, Julian. You can barely fit all your plants in here. We'd make it work. It would be like those sitcoms where unlikely roommates band together to raise a baby and hilarity ensues. This is my actual life, not a sitcom. Julian's phone timer went off. He looked at Sebastian. It's time. I can't look. Sebastian, you look. This is your test now. I don't think that's how biology works. Best friend duties include looking at pregnancy tests, right? I think that's in the contract. I'm pretty sure best friend duties are more like helping you move or pretending to like your bad cooking, not interpreting life-changing medical results. Julian, please. I can't look. With a sigh, Julian got up and grabbed the test. He looked at it. His eyes went wide. What? Sebastian scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. What does it say? Wordlessly, Julian turned the test around. 2 pink lines. Positive. For a moment, Sebastian just stared at it, his brain refusing to process what he was seeing. Then reality crashed over him like a wave, cold and overwhelming and utterly life-changing. I'm pregnant, he whispered. You're pregnant, Julian confirmed. With Dominic Covington's baby. Yes. The baby his mother said you couldn't have. The very same. Sebastian started laughing. It was slightly hysterical, bordering on unhinged, but he couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation was just too much. Oh my God, he gasped between laughs. Oh my God, this is insane. Margaret Covington kicked me out because she thought I couldn't get pregnant, and I'm literally pregnant. What are you going to do? Julian asked, though he was smiling too, caught up in the ridiculous irony of it all. I have no idea. Sebastian was laughing so hard now that tears were streaming down his face. This is the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened to anyone. I should call her. Hey Margaret, remember how you said I was defective? Well, there's a tiny Covington currently under construction in my uterus, so joke's on you. Okay, maybe we don't call her. But we should call a doctor. Doctor, yes. That's the logical next step. Sebastian took a deep breath, trying to calm down. And then I guess I have to tell Dominic. Have you heard from him at all? Sebastian checked his phone. There was a message from Dominic that had come in an hour ago, while Sebastian was panicking in the pharmacy aisle. Dominic, good morning. Singapore is exhausting, but productive. How are things at home? Miss you. Sebastian stared at the message. Dominic had no idea. He was in Singapore, probably in some high-rise office drinking expensive coffee and talking about quarterly reports, completely unaware that his mother had thrown out his Omega and that said Omega was currently having a minor breakdown in a bathroom. I can't tell him over text, Sebastian said. This isn't a text conversation, so call him. And say what? Hey, honey, your mother kicked me out 2 days ago. I'm currently living on Julian's couch, and oh, by the way, I'm pregnant. I mean, when you put it that way. This is a disaster. Sebastian slid down the wall to sit on the floor again. This is an actual disaster, Julian. I'm pregnant. There's a baby. A tiny person who's going to depend on me for everything. And I don't even have a place to live. Or a job. Or, breathe. Julian sat down next to him, pulling him into a side hug. One thing at a time. First, we make you a doctor's appointment to confirm and make sure everything's okay. Then you figure out what you want to do about Dominic and his nightmare family. Okay. Sebastian nodded, taking deep breaths. Okay. One thing at a time. Good. Julian stood up and held out a hand. Now I'm going to make breakfast, and you're going to eat something that isn't ice cream or existential dread. Can I have toast? You can have whatever you want. You're growing a human. As Julian headed to the kitchen, Sebastian sat on the bathroom floor, staring at the positive pregnancy test in his hand. Despite the chaos and uncertainty and absolute ridiculousness of the situation, he felt a tiny flutter of something that might have been joy. He was going to be a parent. Now, he just had to figure out how to tell the father. Dr. Sarah Chen had been Sebastian's physician for 5 years. She was a calm, no-nonsense Omega specialist who had seen him through everything. heat cycles, the flu. That one time he tried a new birth control, and it had made him break out in hives. She was exactly the kind of steady presence he needed right now. So, she said, looking at Sebastian over her tablet, "The blood test confirms it. You're pregnant. About 6 weeks along." She smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "Congratulations." Sebastian felt the words settle over him like a blanket. He'd known, of course, the home pregnancy test had been pretty clear, even the one that had apparently been defective and given him a brief heart attack. But hearing it from a doctor made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "Everything looks healthy," he asked nervously. "Everything looks perfect. Your hormone levels are exactly where they should be for 6 weeks." Dr. Chun set down her tablet. "Would you like to see the ultrasound?" Sebastian nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Julian, who had insisted on coming to the appointment and was currently sitting in the corner, trying not to cry, squeezed his hand. Dr. Chen turned the screen toward them and pointed to a tiny flickering spot. "There's the heartbeat." Sebastian stared at the screen, at the tiny blob that didn't look like much of anything, but was apparently his baby. He felt tears start to roll down his cheeks, hot and unexpected and absolutely unstoppable. "That's my baby," he whispered. "That's your baby," Dr. Chen confirmed gently. "About the size of a lentil right now." Julian was crying too, Sebastian noticed. "It's so small," Julian said, his voice wobbly. "Look how small it is." Dr. Chen smiled. She'd probably seen this reaction 1,000 times, but there was genuine warmth in her expression. "The baby will grow quickly now. I'll want to see you back in 4 weeks for another checkup. In the meantime, I'm prescribing prenatal vitamins and some anti-nausea medication if you need it." She printed out a copy of the ultrasound and handed it to Sebastian. "Do you have any questions?" Sebastian had about 1,000,000 questions, but he started with the most pressing. "Is it safe to? I mean, given that I'm currently living with my friend and not in the most stable situation." He trailed off, not sure how to articulate his concerns. Dr. Chen's expression softened. "Pregnancy doesn't require perfect circumstances, Sebastian. Yes, reducing stress is ideal, but babies have been born in all sorts of situations. What's most important is that you take care of yourself. Eat well. Take your vitamins. And try not to worry too much." "Try not to worry," Sebastian repeated. "Right? That should be easy, given that the father doesn't know I'm pregnant, his mother threw me out, and I have no job or permanent housing." "The father doesn't know?" Dr. Chen asked carefully. "It's complicated. It's a nightmare," Julian interjected from the corner. "His alpha's mother is a villain from a soap opera. I'm not exaggerating. She has minions." "I see." Dr. Chen made a note on her tablet, her expression unreadable. "Well, I would recommend telling the father sooner rather than later, especially if you want him involved. But that's ultimately your decision, Sebastian. This is your pregnancy, your body, your choice about who you tell and when." Sebastian nodded, clutching the ultrasound printout. His choice, right? After the appointment, Julian took Sebastian to lunch at a small cafe near the medical center. Sebastian ordered soup and crackers, the only things that didn't make his stomach turn, and tried to process everything. "You're really quiet," Julian observed. "Are you okay?" "I'm pregnant," Sebastian said, as if testing out the words. "I'm actually really pregnant." "You are?" "With Dominic Covington's baby." "Yep." Sebastian pulled out the ultrasound picture and stared at it. The tiny blob with its flickering heartbeat. His baby. His and Dominic's. The baby his mother said I couldn't have. Irony remains spectacular. I have to tell him. "Do you want to call him?" "No. This isn't a phone conversation." Sebastian checked his phone. "He's back from Singapore tomorrow, right?" "Yeah." "His flight lands at 3 p.m. Are you going to go to the estate?" "God, no. I'm not setting foot in that place again. Not with Margaret there." Sebastian thought for a moment. Can he come to your apartment? Of course. It's not exactly impressive. Julian, I don't care about impressive. I just need somewhere neutral to tell my alpha that he's going to be a father, and also that his mother is a nightmare who kicked me out. Fair point. Sebastian sent a text to Dominic. Sebastian, we need to talk. Can you come to Julian's apartment tomorrow when you land? It's important. The response came a few minutes later. Dominic, is everything okay? You're worrying me. Sebastian typed and deleted several responses before settling on. Sebastian, everything's fine. We just need to talk in person. It wasn't entirely true, but he couldn't exactly drop the pregnancy bomb over text. That night, lying on Julian's couch and staring at the ceiling, Sebastian tried to imagine how the conversation would go. Best case scenario, Dominic would be thrilled. He'd apologize profusely for his mother's behavior. He'd immediately move Sebastian into his penthouse apartment, the one Margaret didn't have a key to, and they'd live happily ever after. Worst case scenario, Dominic would side with his mother. He'd suggest that maybe Sebastian was lying about the pregnancy to get back into the family's good graces. Sebastian would end up raising a baby on his own while working 3 jobs to make ends meet. Reality would probably be somewhere in the middle. Sebastian knew Dominic was a good person. He'd seen it in 1,000 small moments, the way Dominic held his hand when he was anxious, the way he remembered little details, the way he looked at Sebastian like he was something precious. But Dominic was also completely under his mother's thumb. Standing up to Margaret Covington would require a spine that Sebastian wasn't sure Dominic had. His phone buzzed with another message. Dominic, I'm taking the first flight I can get tomorrow morning. I'll be at Julian's by noon. Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out together. Despite everything, Sebastian felt a flutter of hope. Maybe Dominic would surprise him. Maybe he'd finally stand up to his mother. Maybe everything would actually be okay. Or maybe Sebastian was delusional from pregnancy hormones and exhaustion. Either way, tomorrow would tell. Dominic Covington arrived at Julian's apartment at 11:47 a.m., looking like he'd run the entire way from the airport. His usually immaculate hair was disheveled. His tie was askew. He had the expression of someone who'd spent the entire flight catastrophizing about what could possibly be so important that his Omega needed to talk to him in person. Julian opened the door, took one look at Dominic's face, and said, He's fine. He's on the couch. I'm going to make myself scarce. Julian, you don't have to, Sebastian started, but Julian was already grabbing his jacket. I'm going to visit the plant store. I'll be back in an hour. Maybe 2. Maybe 3. Julian looked at Dominic, his expression serious. Whatever happened, whatever is happening, I want you to know that if you hurt him, I know people. You know people. Dominic repeated. Vague people. Dangerous people. People who can do things. Julian, you work at a library with very strict late fees and no mercy. With that, Julian left, closing the door behind him with more force than necessary. Sebastian and Dominic stared at each other across the small apartment. Dominic broke the silence first. Sebastian, what's going on? Your messages have been so strange. And when I talked to my mother, she said, he stopped. What did she tell you? What did she tell you? Dominic countered. She said you decided to take some time apart. That you needed space to think about your future and our relationship. Dominic stepped closer. But that doesn't sound like you. You would have talked to me first. And why are you at Julian's? Why aren't you at the estate? Dominic. Sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want to know what's happening. Did something happen? Did I do something wrong? Because I've been going over everything in my head, and I can't figure out. Your mother kicked me out. The words hung in the air like smoke. Dominic's expression went from confused to shocked to angry in the span of about 3 seconds. She what? 3 days ago, while you were in Singapore. Sebastian's voice was surprisingly steady, considering the storm of emotions swirling in his chest. She told me that I was defective because I hadn't gotten pregnant yet, that I was wasting your time, that the Covington line needed an heir. And then she had Gerald escort me off the property. Dominic looked like he'd been physically struck. He sat down heavily on Julian's armchair, all the color draining from his face. She wouldn't. She did. Ask Gerald if you don't believe me. I believe you. Dominic ran his hands through his hair, making it even messier. God, Sebastian. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. She told me you decided to leave, that you wanted space, that I should give you time to think. He looked up, his eyes full of pain. I thought maybe you were tired of waiting for me to propose or something. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. You did do something wrong, Sebastian said quietly. Dominic flinched. You let her control everything, Sebastian continued. For 2 years, Dominic. 2 years of her subtle digs about my omega status, her helpful suggestions about fertility treatments, her pointed comments about the Covington line. And you never once stood up for me. I know. Dominic's voice cracked. You're right. I should have set boundaries with her years ago. She's my mother. And she's always been controlling. And I thought if I just kept the peace. You can't keep the peace with someone who sees me as defective breeding stock, Dominic. I know. Dominic stood up, agitated. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Sebastian. I should have protected you. I should have told her to back off. I should have done a lot of things differently. They stared at each other, 2 years of unspoken tension finally bubbling to the surface. I'm pregnant, Sebastian said. Dominic looked like he'd been hit by a truck. You're... what? Pregnant? 6 weeks along. I found out yesterday. Went to the doctor this morning to confirm. Sebastian pulled out the ultrasound picture and handed it to Dominic. So your mother kicked me out for not being able to provide an heir, but plot twist, there's literally a Covington heir right here. Dominic stared at the ultrasound picture like it was written in a foreign language. His hands were shaking. This is our baby. Our baby. We're having a baby. I'm going to be a father. Yes, eventually. Dominic looked up from the picture, and Sebastian was startled to see tears streaming down his face. We're having a baby, he repeated, his voice breaking. Before Sebastian could respond, Dominic crossed the small living room and pulled him into a hug so tight it was almost painful. We're having a baby, he said into Sebastian's hair. Oh my God, we're having a baby. Despite his anger and hurt, Sebastian felt himself soften slightly. This was the Dominic he'd fallen in love with, the one who was genuine and emotional and cared deeply about the people in his life. Yes, we are, Sebastian said. But Dominic, we need to talk about your mother. Dominic pulled back, wiping his eyes. I'm going to handle it. Right now. Today. She kicked out my pregnant Omega, the mother of my child. And she's going to answer for that. Dominic. No. You were right. I should have stood up to her years ago, and I didn't. But this ends now. Dominic's jaw was set in a way Sebastian had never seen before. I'm not letting her drive you away or control our lives anymore. This is our baby, our family, and she doesn't get to dictate how we live our lives. Sebastian had heard Dominic make similar declarations before, usually followed by him caving to whatever Margaret wanted. But there was something different in his expression now, a determination that Sebastian hadn't seen before. What are you going to do? Sebastian asked carefully. I'm going to go to the estate, and I'm going to tell my mother exactly what I think of her behavior. Dominic took Sebastian's hands. And then you and I are going to move into my penthouse, the one she doesn't have a key to, and we're going to start planning for our baby. Just like that. Just like that. Dominic's eyes were earnest, pleading. I know I've let you down. I know I should have done this years ago. But I'm doing it now. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing our family. And if my mother can't respect that, then she can deal with the consequences. Sebastian wanted to believe him. God, he wanted to believe him so badly. Dominic, if you're going to stand up to her, I'm coming with you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She kicked me out. She called me defective. I deserve to see her face when she finds out she was wrong. Dominic smiled, a bit of his usual humor creeping back. You want to watch me confront my mother? I really, really do. Okay, then. Let's go tell Margaret Covington that she's about to be a grandmother. The drive to the Covington estate was tense. Dominic gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white, while Sebastian sat in the passenger seat trying to mentally prepare himself for round 2 with Margaret Covington. You don't have to do this, Dominic said for the third time. I can handle her. I want to be there, Sebastian replied for the third time. Besides, I want to see her face. Fair enough. They pulled up to the estate gates, which opened automatically. Dominic's car was always granted immediate access. As they drove up the long tree-lined driveway, Sebastian felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Just 3 days ago, he'd been walking down this same driveway with his suitcases, convinced he'd never see this place again. Now he was back, pregnant with the Covington heir, about to watch his alpha confront the woman who'd thrown him out. If this wasn't the plot of a dramatic novel, Sebastian didn't know what was. Gerald met them at the door. His expression was carefully neutral, except for a brief flicker of something, relief, satisfaction, when he saw Sebastian. Master Dominic. Master Sebastian. He stepped aside to let them in. Madam is in the drawing room. Thank you, Gerald, Dominic said, then quieter. Sorry about the scene that's about to happen. Gerald's lips twitched slightly. I assure you, sir, I've witnessed far more dramatic scenes in this household. I shall endeavor to be elsewhere. They found Margaret in the drawing room, having afternoon tea like she hadn't recently destroyed Sebastian's life. She looked up as they entered, and her expression shifted from pleasant to confused to annoyed in rapid succession. Dominic, darling, you're back early. I didn't expect you until this evening. Her eyes landed on Sebastian, and her mouth tightened. And you brought him. His name is Sebastian, Dominic said, his voice cold in a way Sebastian had never heard before. Your son-in-law. The Omega you threw out of our home 3 days ago. Margaret set down her teacup with deliberate care. I see he's been telling tales, Dominic. I was merely trying to what exactly? Destroy my relationship? Drive away the person I love? I was thinking of the family, Dominic. The Covington line needs an heir, and she gestured dismissively at Sebastian, clearly wasn't capable of providing one. I'm pregnant, Sebastian said, unable to help himself. The look on Margaret's face was going to sustain him for years. Margaret's expression froze. You're what? Pregnant, Sebastian repeated, enjoying himself now. 6 weeks along. Doctor confirmed it this morning. There's a heartbeat and everything. He smiled, his sweetest, most innocent smile. So about me being defective and incapable of providing an heir. Margaret's face went through a fascinating series of emotions. Shock, disbelief, calculation, and finally something that might have been triumph. Well, that's wonderful news. She recovered quickly, smoothing down her skirt. See, Dominic? Everything worked out. Once the Omega comes back to the estate, we can begin proper prenatal care. No. Margaret blinked. I'm sorry. I said no. Dominic's voice was steel. Sebastian isn't coming back to the estate. We're moving into my penthouse in the city. Don't be ridiculous, Dominic. The Covington heir needs to be raised at the Covington estate. It's tradition. The Covington heir will be raised by their parents wherever we decide to live. Dominic stepped forward, And for the first time in his life, he looked like he was actually taller than his mother. And Mother, you're going to apologize to Sebastian. Right now. A real apology. Not one of your non-apology apologies. Margaret looked like she'd been asked to eat glass. Dominic, I don't care what you think. Dominic's voice could have cut glass. You threw out my Omega. My pregnant Omega. Because you were too impatient and controlling to let things happen naturally. You called him defective. You made him feel like he wasn't good enough. He paused, letting his words sink in. And you're going to apologize for all of it. Or you're not going to be part of this baby's life. The silence that followed was deafening. Sebastian had never, in 2 years of knowing the Covington family, heard Dominic speak to his mother like this. He'd never heard Dominic set a boundary, make a demand, issue an ultimatum. Margaret, for her part, looked genuinely shocked. You wouldn't try me. Sebastian found himself holding his breath. This was it. The moment that would determine everything. Would Margaret apologize? Would Dominic actually follow through on his threat? Fine. Margaret bit out, each word clearly painful for her to say. Sebastian. I apologize for my hasty actions. Perhaps I was premature in my assessment of the situation. It was possibly the worst apology Sebastian had ever heard, delivered with all the sincerity of a hostage reading a ransom note. But watching Margaret Covington have to apologize to him, the Omega she deemed defective, was more satisfying than Sebastian could have imagined. And Dominic prompted. Margaret's jaw tightened. And you're welcome to return to the estate if you wish. We won't be taking you up on that offer, Sebastian said sweetly. The city sounds lovely, actually. Less sorpresiva. Dominic squeezed Sebastian's hand, probably to stop him from rubbing salt in the wound, but Sebastian caught the slight smile on his face. We'll be in touch, Mother, Dominic said. But from now on, there are going to be some changes. No more dropping by unannounced. No more making decisions about our lives without consulting us. And no more disparaging comments about Sebastian's Omega status or our relationship. He held her gaze. Are we clear? Perfectly, Margaret said through gritted teeth. As they left the drawing room, Sebastian could feel Margaret's eyes boring into his back. But he didn't care. For the first time since this whole nightmare had started, he felt like maybe, just maybe, everything might actually work out. Dominic's penthouse was exactly as Sebastian remembered it, spacious, modern, and decorated with all the personality of a high-end hotel room. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the city. The kitchen was full of top-of-the-line appliances that had probably never been used. The entire place screamed wealthy bachelor who was never home. I know it's not very homey, Dominic said, watching Sebastian explore. But we can change that. We can change anything you want. Sebastian opened the refrigerator and found it even more depressing than he'd expected. One bottle of wine. A container of takeout that looked like it might be achieving sentience. And absolutely nothing else. Dominic, this is the saddest fridge I've ever seen. I usually eat out. You can't eat out for every meal when you have a baby. Babies need nutrients and routine, and Sebastian trailed off, suddenly overwhelmed. Oh God, we're having a baby. A tiny person who's going to need us for everything. He looked up at Dominic. Do you know anything about babies? Dominic looked panicked. I know they're small. That's your entire knowledge base. That babies are small. I mean, I can learn. We can take classes. There are books. Dominic pulled out his phone. I'm ordering books right now. And groceries. What do you need? What do pregnant Omegas eat? Food, Dominic. We eat food. What kind of food? Sebastian couldn't help but laugh at the genuine panic on Dominic's face. Okay, how about we start simple? I need crackers, ginger ale, and pickles. Lots of pickles. What kind of pickles? I don't know. Just pickles. 20 minutes later, Dominic had ordered enough groceries to feed a small army, including 15 different kinds of pickles because he wasn't sure which ones you'd like. "This is insane," Sebastian said, scrolling through the order confirmation. "We don't need 15 jars of pickles. You said you were craving pickles. I want to make sure you have options." "Options for what?" "Opening a pickle emporium." Despite the absurdity, Sebastian felt something warm blooming in his chest. Dominic was trying. He was overwhelmed and clearly had no idea what he was doing, but he was trying. "Thank you," Sebastian said softly, "for buying too many pickles. For everything. For standing up to your mother. For choosing us." Dominic pulled him close, careful not to squeeze too hard. "I should have chosen us a long time ago. But I'm choosing us now. And I'm not going to stop." They spent the rest of the afternoon making the penthouse feel more like home. Sebastian hung the ultrasound picture on the fridge, the first personal touch in the entire sterile kitchen. Dominic ordered furniture for the spare bedroom that would eventually become the nursery. They argued good-naturedly about baby names. Dominic wanted something traditional. Sebastian wanted something that wouldn't make their child sound like they were from the 1800s. When Julian showed up at dinner time with Thai food and an expectant expression, they filled him in on everything that had happened. "You actually told her off?" Julian asked Dominic, looking impressed. "Like, actually told Margaret Covington that she couldn't control your life anymore?" "I did." "And you threatened to keep her from the baby if she didn't apologize?" "I did that too." Julian turned to Sebastian. "I'm sorry I ever doubted him." "To be fair, I also doubted him," Sebastian admitted. "I deserve the doubt," Dominic said. "But I'm going to do better." He looked around the penthouse. "Starting with making this place an actual home instead of a hotel room I occasionally sleep in. Over the next few weeks, that's exactly what they did." The sterile penthouse slowly transformed into something that felt lived in and loved. They painted the nursery a soft yellow, gender-neutral. Sebastian had insisted. They bought actual groceries and learned to cook meals together. Or rather, Sebastian cooked while Dominic provided moral support and occasionally chopped vegetables. Sebastian's morning sickness, which was actually all-day sickness, was rough, but Dominic was there for all of it. Holding his hair back, bringing him ginger ale, learning which foods would and wouldn't trigger nausea. Julian visited constantly, each time bringing some new baby item he'd found. "Look at these tiny shoes," he'd exclaim, holding up booties the size of his thumb. "They're so small." "The baby isn't even here yet," Sebastian would point out. "I'm preparing. I'm going to be the best uncle ever. You're the only uncle, which makes me the best by default." Dominic found this endlessly amusing, while Sebastian found it endearing if slightly excessive. But they bought the tiny shoes anyway. And the tiny hats. And the tiny everything that Julian kept bringing over. Work-wise, Sebastian had started an online consulting business. It turned out that being kicked out by a nightmare mother-in-law had given him the motivation to prove he was more than just Dominic Covington's Omega. The business was actually taking off, which was both exciting and terrifying. "You don't have to work if you don't want to," Dominic said one evening, watching Sebastian type away on his laptop. "I want to work. I like working." Sebastian didn't look up from his screen. "Besides, setting a good example for our child about Omega independence and all that." "Fair point. Just don't overdo it." "Okay," says the alpha who works 12-hour days. "That's different." "How is that different? I'm not growing a human inside me." Weak excuse, Wellington. Things with Margaret remained tense. She called several times, each conversation awkward and stilted. She wanted to be involved with a baby, but didn't quite know how to navigate the new boundaries Dominic had set. "She's trying," Dominic said after one particularly awkward phone call. "In her own controlling, boundary-pushing way." "I know." Sebastian sighed. "I guess that's something. Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" Sebastian thought about it. "Maybe. Eventually. But she's going to have to earn it." He looked up at Dominic. And Dominic, if she ever tries anything like that again, she won't. And if she does, I'll handle it. I promise. As Sebastian's belly grew and the baby became more real with each doctor's appointment, life settled into a new normal. It wasn't perfect. They still had moments of panic about becoming parents. Still argued about baby names. They'd narrowed it down to about 15 options, which was progress. Still had to navigate the complicated relationship with Margaret. But it was theirs. Messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like what Sebastian had imagined when he'd woken up that Tuesday morning 3 months ago. And somehow it was perfect. At 4 months pregnant, Sebastian had finally stopped throwing up everything he ate, which he considered a major victory. His baby bump was clearly visible now, and Dominic had developed an adorable habit of talking to it every morning. "Good morning, baby Covington," Dominic would say to Sebastian's stomach. "Today we're going to learn about market analysis." Baby can't understand market analysis, Dominic. It's never too early to start their education. They don't even have fully formed ears yet. The parenting books say babies can hear sounds in the womb. Hearing sounds is not the same as understanding corporate finance. This had become their morning routine, and despite Sebastian's protests, he found it unbearably cute. Life had settled into something resembling normalcy. Sebastian's business was thriving. It turned out that being the Omega who'd been kicked out by the Covington family and came back pregnant had actually given him a certain notoriety in business circles. Who knew? Dominic had started working from home more often, claiming he wanted to be available for Sebastian, but really just wanting to be near him and the baby. Sebastian didn't mind. It was nice having his alpha around, even if Dominic did hover like Sebastian might shatter at any moment. Julian had basically become a permanent fixture in their lives, showing up at least 3 times a week with new baby acquisitions. "Look at this mobile," he'd announced last week, carrying in an elaborate contraption with tiny planets and stars. It's space-themed. Your baby can learn about the cosmos while developing their visual tracking skills. Julian, they're not even born yet. Preparation is key. Margaret had been surprisingly quiet, limiting her contact to weekly phone calls where she asked polite questions about the pregnancy and managed to only be subtly controlling about half the time. Progress, Dominic called it. So when Margaret invited them to a dinner party at the estate, just a small gathering, nothing major, Sebastian's first instinct was to refuse. "Come on," Dominic cajoled. "She's been trying. And it's for a good cause. She's raising money for that Omega Health charity. The charity is fine. Your mother's dinner parties are nightmares. I'll be with you the whole time. And we can leave whenever you want. Promise. Promise." Which was how Sebastian found himself back at the Covington estate on a Saturday evening, wearing one of the few formal outfits that still fit over his growing belly, trying not to have flashbacks to being escorted off the property 4 months ago. "You okay?" Dominic asked, squeezing his hand. "Just memories. We can leave right now if you want." "No, I can do this." Sebastian took a deep breath. "It's just dinner. How bad can it be?" Narrator's voice. "It could be very bad." The dinner started normally enough. Margaret greeted them at the door, air-kissed near Sebastian's cheeks, and complimented his lovely glow, which Sebastian suspected was just sweat from pregnancy, but he'd take it. "So glad you could make it, darling," she said to Dominic. "And Sebastian, you're looking well. How is the baby?" "Active," Sebastian said, which was true. The baby had started kicking recently and apparently enjoyed doing gymnastics at 3 a.m. "Wonderful. Come, there are some people I'd like you to meet." The first hour was fine. Sebastian made polite small talk with various society couples, accepted congratulations on the pregnancy, and managed not to roll his eyes when people inevitably asked if he was hoping for an alpha. "We're hoping for a healthy baby," he'd reply each time, which was the truth. He and Dominic had decided not to find out the baby's status before birth. They'd love them regardless. Halfway through dinner, Sebastian excused himself to use the restroom, Pregnancy meant he had to pee constantly, which was both annoying and unavoidable. On his way back, he overheard voices from the adjacent parlor. Can't believe Margaret is just accepting this. Accepting what? That Omega raising the Covington heir after everything that happened. Sebastian froze just outside the doorway. Well, what choice does she have? The Omega got pregnant, and Dominic actually stood up to her for once. Still, it's quite scandalous. Being thrown out and then coming back pregnant. Pause. Some might say it seems calculated. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying the timing is convenient. Sebastian felt heat rising to his face. They were implying he'd gotten pregnant on purpose. To trap Dominic. Or something equally ridiculous. He should walk away. He should be the bigger person. He should. He walked into the parlor with his best smile. Hi. Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing you discussing me. The two women, society types who Sebastian vaguely recognized from other events, went pale. We weren't. We didn't mean. Oh, I think you meant exactly what you said. Sebastian's smile got sharper. You're implying I got pregnant on purpose after being thrown out, right? To trap the wealthy alpha. We didn't say. Let me clarify something. Sebastian leaned against the doorframe, channeling every ounce of confidence he possessed. I was already pregnant when Margaret kicked me out. She just didn't bother to wait and find out before declaring me defective. We didn't say defective. No, Margaret said that. You're just here gossiping about it, which is so much better. He tilted his head. Here's a tip. If you're going to talk about someone, maybe make sure they're not within earshot. Just a thought. He turned and walked away, leaving them stammering behind him. He nearly collided with Dominic in the hallway. Did you just eviscerate Mrs. Harrison and Mrs. Blackwood? Maybe. That was the hottest thing I've ever seen. Sebastian laughed despite himself. Your mother is going to kill me. My mother can deal with it. Those women were out of line, but Margaret had other plans. She found them a few minutes later, looking less pleased than she had at the start of the evening. Sebastian, dear, perhaps we should discuss appropriate behavior at social gatherings. Appropriate behavior? Sebastian's temper, already frayed from the pregnancy and the gossip of being back in this house, snapped. Is it appropriate for your guests to imply I got pregnant on purpose to trap Dominic? They were merely gossiping about me, about your grandchild, in your house, at your dinner party. Margaret had the grace to look uncomfortable. Yes, well, you know how society can be. Actually, I don't know. Because I'm just a defective Omega who got lucky, right? I never said. You did. 4 months ago. Before you kicked me out of my home, the hallway had gone very quiet. Several guests had stopped to watch the drama unfold. Dominic stepped forward. Mother, I think we're going to leave now. Dominic, don't be ridiculous. The evening has barely started, and we're ending it. Sebastian's right. Your guests were out of line, and instead of addressing that, you're criticizing him for defending himself. He took Sebastian's hand. We'll see you next week for our regular check-in. Come on, Sebastian. As they walked toward the exit, Sebastian could hear the whispers starting up again. But he didn't care. He was done caring what Margaret's society friends thought of him. In the car, Sebastian let out a shaky breath. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made a scene. Are you kidding? Dominic glanced over at him, and there was something like pride in his eyes. You were amazing. Standing up for yourself. For our family. He reached over and squeezed Sebastian's hand. Sebastian, I'm proud of you. Your mother probably hates me even more now. My mother needs to learn that actions have consequences. And her friends need to learn some basic manners. Dominic pulled out of the estate gates. You okay? Yeah. Just tired. And the baby is doing gymnastics, which is not helpful right now. Let's go home. We can order food, watch terrible TV, and forget about society drama for a while. Best idea you've had all day. When they got home, Julian was waiting outside their building with Thai food and a knowing expression. I heard about the dinner party disaster, he said without preamble. How did you already hear about it? It ended 20 minutes ago. I have my sources. Julian held up the takeout bags. Also, Mrs. Harrison's Omega assistant is my yoga buddy, and they were live texting me the whole thing. I brought comfort, food, and validation. You're the best friend ever. I know. Now let's go inside so you can tell me exactly what you said to those horrible women. I want every detail. As they ate Thai food and Sebastian recounted the evening's events, with Julian cheering at all the right moments, Dominic's phone buzzed with a text from his mother. She wants to have lunch next week to discuss appropriate boundaries at social events, Dominic read. Is she serious right now? Sebastian asked. Apparently. I'm going to tell her that her guests are the ones who need to learn about appropriate boundaries. Don't antagonize her too much. She's still your mother. She called you defective and kicked you out while you were pregnant with her grandchild. I think I can antagonize her a little bit. Julian raised his spring roll. I'll drink to that. Or eat to that. You know what I mean. Despite the disaster of the evening, Sebastian found himself smiling. Yes, society was still gossiping about them. Yes, Margaret was still being difficult. Yes, everything was complicated and messy. But he had Dominic, who was finally standing up for their family. He had Julian, who brought comfort, food, and unconditional support. And he had a baby doing gymnastics in his belly, blissfully unaware of all the drama. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. At 7 months pregnant, Sebastian was officially huge. Or, as Dominic diplomatically put it, gloriously round with our child. I'm the size of a house, Sebastian said, staring at himself in the mirror. You're beautiful. I can't see my feet. Your feet are also beautiful. You have to say that. You did this to me. Dominic came up behind him, wrapping his arms around Sebastian's considerable belly. And I'm very proud of my work. Look at this, you're growing our baby in there. That's amazing. I'm also growing out of all my clothes at an alarming rate. I had to buy new pajamas yesterday because my stomach kept escaping from the old ones. We'll buy more pajamas. That's your solution to everything. Just buy things. I'm a Covington. Purchasing solutions is literally in our DNA. Despite the discomfort, Sebastian couldn't help but smile. The baby chose that moment to kick hard enough that Dominic could feel it. Whoa, that was your child practicing their martial arts routine. They've been doing this all morning. Dominic's face lit up with that expression he got every time the baby moved, pure wonder and joy. He dropped to his knees and put his face near Sebastian's belly. Hello in there. This is your father. Could you maybe go easy on your dad? He's working very hard growing you. The baby kicked again, as if in response. I think they're saying no, Sebastian said. Already stubborn. They're definitely yours. Excuse me, have you met your family? Stubbornness is a Covington trait. They'd finally settled on a name. Emma Rose for a girl, James Alexander for a boy. It had only taken 6 months of debate, countless lists, and one memorable argument where they'd almost named their child TBD just to end the discussion. The nursery was finished, decorated in soft yellows and greens, with constellation decals on the ceiling, Julian's contribution. They had a crib, a changing table, more tiny clothes than any baby could possibly wear, and approximately 7,000 parenting books that Sebastian had been reading obsessively. I don't think we're ready, Sebastian said one evening, surrounded by said books. No one is ever ready, Dominic replied, looking up from the baby monitor he was attempting to set up. That's not comforting. It's honest, though. Julian had started coming over even more frequently, if that was possible. He'd announced that he was taking 2 weeks off when the baby arrived to help, but really just to spend time with his niece or nephew. I'm going to teach them everything, Julian had declared. Art, music, literature, how to make a proper cup of tea. They're going to be a newborn Julian. They're not going to care about tea. It's never too early to develop refined tastes. Work had slowed down as Sebastian's due date approached. He'd taken on a few contract projects he could complete from home, but mostly he was preparing for the baby's arrival and trying not to panic about becoming a parent. Margaret had been better. Not great, but better. She'd apologized again for the dinner party incident and had actually started respecting the boundaries Dominic had set. She called once a week, asked about the baby, and managed to keep her controlling tendencies to a minimum. I think becoming a grandmother is softening her, Dominic observed after one particularly pleasant phone call. Let's not go that far. But she's definitely trying. It's weird, right? My mother actually trying to be considerate. Extremely weird. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. 2 weeks before Sebastian's due date, they had their final baby preparedness class. It had been Dominic's idea to take the classes, and Sebastian had to admit they'd been helpful, even if some of the other couples had given them strange looks. Being the Omega who got kicked out and came back pregnant had apparently made them minor celebrities in prenatal class circles. Remember, the instructor said, babies come on their own schedule. Your due date is just an estimate. So make sure your bags are packed and you're ready to go at any moment. Our bags have been packed for 3 weeks, Dominic whispered to Sebastian. You packed them 3 weeks ago. You've also checked them 17 times to make sure we have everything. Preparedness is important. That night, Sebastian woke up at 2 a.m. with cramps. Not terrible ones, but enough to make him uncomfortable. Dominic. He shook his alpha awake. Dominic, I think. Dominic shot up like he'd been electrocuted. Is it time? Are you in labor? Where are the bags? Why can't I remember where the bags are? The bags are by the door. Where they've been for 3 weeks. Sebastian breathed through another cramp. Calm down. You calm down. I am calm. You're the one panicking. I'm not panicking. I'm in labor. There's a difference. The cramps got worse. They called the doctor, who told him to come to the hospital to be checked. The drive to the hospital was surreal. This was it. After months of preparation, panic, and planning, they were actually going to meet their baby. I can't believe this is happening, Dominic said, gripping the steering wheel. Believe it. Because this baby is coming whether we're ready or not. They arrived at the hospital at 3 a.m. The contractions were irregular, but definitely real. The doctor checked Sebastian and delivered the news. He was in early labor. Could be hours, the doctor said. Could be longer. First babies like to take their time. Hours. Sebastian repeated weakly. Sometimes longer. Let's get you settled in a room. The next 12 hours were a blur. Contractions. Breathing exercises. Dominic holding his hand and possibly losing circulation in said hand from Sebastian's grip. Julian showing up with an overnight bag because I'm not missing this for the world. You're supposed to be at work, Sebastian pointed out between contractions. Called in sick. Family emergency. You know, because you're having a baby. That's not a family emergency. It is to me. Through the haze of pain and exhaustion, Sebastian noticed that Dominic was handling this remarkably well. He didn't panic when Sebastian yelled at him. Only twice. He didn't faint when things got intense. He stayed calm, supportive, and present. You're doing amazing, Dominic kept saying. You're so strong. You've got this. I really don't got this, Sebastian gasped. This is terrible. Why do people do this more than once? You're doing great. I love you so much. I love you too. But if you ever try to get me pregnant again, I'm divorcing you. We're not married yet. Then I'm preemptively divorcing you. Julian, standing in the corner and filming everything with Sebastian's reluctant permission, was definitely crying. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, The doctor said the word Sebastian had been both dreading and longing to hear. It's time to push. At 4:47 p.m., after 12 hours of labor, Emma Rose Covington entered the world. She was crying at the top of her tiny lungs, which the doctor assured them was a good sign. She was perfect, 7 pounds, 4 ounces of absolute perfection. She had Dominic's nose and Sebastian's eyes, or so they claimed. She was very squinty, and an impressive set of lungs that she immediately put to use. "Oh my God," Sebastian breathed as the doctor placed Emma on his chest. "Oh my God, she's here. She's actually here. She's perfect," Dominic said, tears streaming down his face. "Sebastian, she's perfect. You're perfect. I can't believe she's ours. We made a person." Emma stopped crying long enough to blink up at them, her tiny face scrunched in what might have been confusion about suddenly existing outside the womb. "Hello, Emma," Sebastian whispered. "We've been waiting for you." She gripped his finger with surprising strength, and Sebastian felt his heart expand in a way he hadn't known was possible. This was his daughter. His and Dominic's daughter. Julian, still filming, still openly sobbing, managed to choke out, "She's so small. Look how small she is." After the medical staff had checked Emma over and declared her perfectly healthy, they gave her back to Sebastian, who couldn't stop staring at her. "We made a person," he said to Dominic. "We made the best person. She's not even an hour old yet. Still the best person." Over the next few hours, they made phone calls to announce Emma's arrival. Sebastian's parents cried happy tears. Dominic's father called to offer congratulations and promises to visit soon. And Margaret arrived within the hour, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "May I see her?" she asked quietly from the doorway. Dominic looked at Sebastian, who nodded. "Come in, Margaret." She approached slowly, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked almost like vulnerability. When she got close enough to see Emma properly, sleeping in Sebastian's arms, her entire expression softened in a way Sebastian had never seen before. "She's beautiful," Margaret whispered. "May I? May I hold her?" Sebastian handed Emma over carefully, watching as Margaret cradled her granddaughter with surprising gentleness. "Hello, Emma Rose," Margaret said softly. "I'm your grandmother. I have a lot to learn about being a good grandmother, but I promise I'm going to try. You're going to teach me so much." It wasn't forgiveness. Not entirely. But it was a start. A genuine start. Dominic slipped his hand into Sebastian's, and they watched Margaret with her daughter, this woman who had caused so much pain but was clearly trying to do better. "Thank you," Margaret said quietly, looking at Sebastian, "for giving me a chance to be part of her life. I know I don't deserve it after how I treated you, but thank you. Just don't kick me out again," Sebastian said, only half joking. "Never. I promise." Margaret looked back down at Emma. "Besides, this little one wouldn't let me, would you, darling? You're going to keep your grandmother in line." After Margaret left, with promises to visit again tomorrow and to call before coming, which was progress, Sebastian and Dominic were finally alone with their daughter. Well, alone except for Julian, who had taken approximately 7,000 photos and was now curled up in the uncomfortable hospital chair, asleep. "We're parents," Sebastian said wonderingly. "We're parents," Dominic confirmed. "How do you feel?" "Exhausted. Overwhelmed. Terrified." Sebastian looked down at Emma, who was making tiny baby noises in her sleep. "Happy. So happy." Emma made a small noise, and both of them immediately went on high alert. "Is she okay? Does she need something? Should we call the nurse?" "Dominic, she's fine. She's just making baby noises." "Are baby noises normal?" "I think so. The books mention baby noises. Should we check the books to be sure?" Sebastian laughed, exhausted and delirious and more in love than he'd ever been. "We're going to be those parents, aren't we? The ones who panic about everything." "Probably." "Good. I'd be worried if we weren't worried." Epilogue. 6 months later. Emma's half-birthday party was Julian's idea. Sebastian had pointed out that half-birthdays weren't really a thing people celebrated, but Julian had insisted that every milestone deserved recognition. "She's 6 months old," Julian had declared. "That's a big deal. She's halfway to 1. That's technically true, but we're having a party. I'm making a cake. Don't argue with me." So they had a party. Margaret was there, actually sitting on the floor next to Emma's playmat, making silly faces that were absolutely not dignified for a Covington, but made Emma laugh her adorable baby laugh. "I never thought I'd see the day," Julian whispered to Sebastian, watching Margaret play peekaboo. "I know. It's weird, right? Extremely weird. But also kind of nice." "Yeah." Sebastian smiled. "Kind of nice." Emma had turned into an absolute delight of a baby. She was smiley and curious, just starting to sit up on her own, and had Dominic completely wrapped around her tiny finger. "Who's the cutest baby in the world?" Dominic cooed at her. "You are." "Yes, you are. You've become one of those parents," Sebastian observed. "I know. I don't even care." Work was going well for both of them. Sebastian's consulting business was thriving. Turns out being able to work from home while watching a baby was actually possible with the right schedule and a lot of coffee. Dominic had started working from home more too, claiming it was to maintain work-life balance, but really just wanting to spend more time with Emma. Their relationship with Margaret had improved significantly. She still had her controlling moments, but she respected boundaries now. She called before visiting. She didn't make disparaging comments about Omegas. And she had actually apologized, genuinely apologized, several more times for how she treated Sebastian. "I was wrong," she'd said last month during one of her visits. "About so many things. About Omega rights. About what matters in life. About you." She'd met Sebastian's eyes. "I'm sorry. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And that counted for something." As Sebastian watched his strange little family, Dominic trying to convince Emma to eat mashed sweet potatoes while she blew raspberries at him, Julian taking approximately 7 million photos, Margaret offering actually helpful advice about babies, he couldn't help but think about how much had changed in a year. A year ago, he'd been thrown out of the Covington estate, declared defective, told he wasn't good enough. Now he was here, successful, happy, surrounded by people who loved him, with a daughter who was perfect in every way. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked, coming over with Emma in his arms. She immediately reached for Sebastian, making her little grabby hands. "Just everything. How much has changed?" "Good changes. Mostly good." Sebastian took Emma, who immediately grabbed a fistful of his hair. "Some weird changes. Margaret playing peekaboo will never not be weird." Dominic laughed. "True. But weird good. Weird good." Emma let out a squeal of delight and pulled Sebastian's hair harder. "Oh, Emma, that's attached to my head." "She's very strong," Dominic said proudly. "Takes after her dad." "Which one?" "Both." Later that evening, after the party had ended and Julian had left with leftover cake and promises to babysit any time they needed, Sebastian sat in the nursery's rocking chair with Emma. She was almost asleep, her eyes drooping as she fought to stay awake. "Let me tell you a story," Sebastian said softly. Emma blinked up at him. Once upon a time, there was an Omega who got thrown out by his Alpha's family because they didn't think he was good enough. But plot twist, he was already pregnant with their heir. Emma made a cooing noise. And you know what? That Omega built a whole new life. And he was happy. And he had the most perfect daughter in the world. Emma's eyes finally closed. Then Sebastian whispered. And they all lived messily ever after. Dominic appeared in the doorway, watching them with that soft expression he got whenever he saw Sebastian with Emma. "She asleep?" I think the party wore her out. Let's get her in the crib, and then we can actually relax for 5 minutes before she wakes up again. They worked together to settle Emma in her crib, a process they perfected over the past 6 months. She sighed but didn't wake, which they counted as a victory. In their bedroom, Sebastian collapsed onto the bed with a groan. Parenting is exhausting, but worth it. So worth it. Dominic lay down next to him, pulling him close. I love you. And I love our weird, complicated, perfect little family. I love you too. Even though your mother tried to ruin my life, she's trying to be better. She really is. It's unsettling. Would you prefer she go back to being terrible? No. This is better. Just weird. They lay in comfortable silence for a moment. Do you ever think about what would have happened if Margaret hadn't kicked you out? Dominic asked. Sometimes. Sebastian stared at the ceiling. I probably wouldn't have started my business. We probably wouldn't have moved into the penthouse. We might not have figured out all the communication issues we were having. He turned his head to look at Dominic. So, in a weird way, getting kicked out was the best thing that could have happened. Don't tell your mother that, though. She doesn't need the ego boost. Dominic laughed. Deal. Emma started fussing from the nursery. I've got it, Sebastian said, already getting up. I'll make you tea. You're perfect. I'm really not. But I'm trying. As Sebastian went to comfort Emma and Dominic headed to the kitchen, the penthouse filled with the sounds of their life. A baby crying, footsteps on hardwood floors, the kettle starting to boil, soft voices soothing and comforting. It wasn't the life Sebastian had imagined a year ago. It was better. Messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like a fairy tale. But it was theirs. And that made it perfect. Then,